COVID-19 has thrown many lives into disorder, disrupting our normal and getting us off track. But is there a secret to getting back on track and fulfilling the dreams and goals that we have in life? Today's guest is Kary Oberbrunner, who is a life coach and CEO of Lighting Souls and author of Unhackable: Close the Gap Between Dreaming and Doing, available at karyoberbrunner.com. Kary joins me today via Skype from Columbus, Ohio. Kary, hello. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, Jeanette.
All right. So, Kary, can you give us a brief overview of what your book is about?
Yeah, so nobody woke up on January 1st saying a pandemic is going to happen, or politics, at least here in the US, are going to be so traumatic. But the reality is that we woke up to 2020 thinking everything would be normal, but in a real way, we got hacked. And when people hear the word hack, they often think about a bank account or their phone. But the word hacked means when someone or something gains unauthorized access to a system or a computer. And when we think about our own bodies, they're made up of systems, circulatory, respiratory, and our brains are like supercomputers. So in a real way, we woke up thinking everything was going to be cool, but then life hacked us. And there's a cost to being hacked mentally.
Okay, so we know basically what happens when our computer gets hacked, right? But what exactly is a hack on our lives? Can you maybe give us some examples?
Yes. So most people wake up and they think, you know what, I have so many cool things I'm going to do today, even if they're quarantined. They think I have a plan. But the reality is that we touch our phones with taps, swipes, or clicks 2,600 times a day, which is crazy. We have an average of 5,000 ads pass before our eyes. We have to make 35,000 decisions every single day. In fact, about food, it's 226. So we're in this world right now where there's so much information coming at us that instead of responding to our day, we essentially react to our day. Most people within the first 10 minutes, and guilty, we're checking our phones. Well, what happens when you check your phone? It's everyone else's agenda for your life. And apps come with preloaded notifications. We have wearables today. I get it. I mean, technology is a tool we're supposed to use, but now technology is using us.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? So Kary, how can we protect ourselves from these so-called hacks?
Well, until we get what's called our boon, and it's just a fancy word to say your big dream, but until we understand what our dream is in life, we actually don't care if we get hacked. It's kind of like saying, well, you know what, this is just the way it is, and this is how things are. But once you have a dream, then you suddenly say that dream is worth more than binging on Netflix, or going to the latest games and always being full with meetings. So the point is that nobody wakes up and says, I want to have a hacked life. But instead, at the end of the day, we often say things like, I'm burnt out, I'm running on fumes, I'm going on empty, I feel fried. We use all these terms that explain our energy level and how it really is finite and limited. But the reality is that we just think we can take on more and more. And part of the problem, Jeanette, is that human knowledge used to double every 1,000 years. So like you think about that in the years past, today we absorb more information than the average person used to do in their entire lifetime. We do in one day. So you can imagine, like, teens, young people especially, but everybody, we have so much coming at us right now. We no longer can navigate above the noise. So I give little tips. In fact, I call them focus filters. There's 3 of them. One is urgency, another one is agency, and then the third is energy. So let's talk about urgency first. We know that in America, with the medical world, we can just go into the doctor and we can wait in the waiting room and this type of thing. But if we go to something called urgent care here in the US, it costs more. But all of a sudden, we get better service because there's a cost involved. Like if you don't get this person on some machines quick, there's going to be a penalty. There's going to be a death maybe. So urgency in life always amplifies up our attention. And that's what we're in right now, the attention economy that's measured with eyeballs and eardrums. And people, marketers especially, want us to pay attention. In other words, there's a cost before they pay with sales. We pay attention. So Jeanette, what I encourage people to do is that first focus filter is to put a deadline with their dreams. Don't say, someday I'm going to write a book, someday I'm going to start a business. Bring that thing back and say, February 5th, 2021, I'm going to create a business plan. And now all of a sudden that you have a deadline, you don't get hacked as much because you say, that deadline is keeping me on track. But most of us, we don't have deadlines in life.
Now, a lot of people have been, hacked by the COVID pandemic, losing jobs or having hours reduced. So what's your advice on how to get a proper perspective on all of this?
Yeah. I think the number one thing you do is you need to guard your mind. We wake up in one of two ways. We wake up with what's called a victim mindset or a victor mindset. A victim mindset, which again, we're all guilty of, but it says the world happens to me. So this is where we wake up and we say, what did Trump say? What did Biden say? What does the economy say? Like we literally say the world's happening to me. And when you have a victim mindset, you actually feel powerless because you say, I can't control COVID. I can't control this. I can't control that. Well, a victor, and by the way, victims, remember it like this. They lie in bed, blame, excuses, and denial, BED, blame, excuses, and denial. And I've been guilty. But a victor says, I happen to the world. And it doesn't mean you're God or something, but it means I happen to my day. I happen to my smartphone. I happen to my family. Like it brings back a control and a power to the average person, which feels so powerless. And the way that you remember a victor is oar, like an oar, like you put your oar in the water and move forward. Ownership, accountability, and responsibility. And so every day we can either lie in blame, excuses, and denial, or ownership, accountability, and responsibility. And it could be the small things. It could be like, you know what, kids? We're going to actually go out and do a walk at the park. Like that's much better than saying, well, let's just sit here and watch Twitter and see what's blowing up. Because again, we are now creators instead of consumers.
Wow. Now, Kary, I know that setting goals and making plans is a big part of what you teach. So what kinds of goals and plans would you recommend to someone who's, say, lost their job?
Yeah. I think sometimes we shoot too high. And I'm really big into celebrating the small wins. Because if you look at a journey, let's just say you're looking at a mountain and you say, oh my gosh, that would take forever to get up there. Of course, you're going to be overwhelmed. That's like getting the new job. Oh my gosh, I have to go get a resume. I have to get my hair done. If you have hair, I don't have it. So that puts me advantage. But you know what I'm saying? Like it's this big task. So instead, you break it down into smaller goals, micro goals, we call this. And what happens is you start then celebrating the micro goals. Like, I'm going to open up a Word document. Like, as dumb as that sounds, that's a win. And then I'm going to put my name, I'm going to put my experience. You just start laying it out. I'm going to contact a few people and you start celebrating. And here's what happens: the word enthusiasm, you start feeling it again. And enthusiasm is infectious. You know when someone's enthusiastic. The cool thing about that word is it means theos, theos, God, God within, possessed by God. And so literally you can tell when someone's amped, excited, when it's authentic. And that's something that actually does get you hired, not someone who's sitting there saying, how much time do I get off? And what are the benefits? That's very self-focused. You want to be other-centric.
Interesting. Okay, so most of us have some sort of dream, right? So things that we'd like to achieve in life, but a lot of us may not be so sure if these desires are actually part of our destiny or if they're just a pipe dream. So any advice
Yeah,
on how to know what God's will is for our life?
that's a great question. I used to have this approach that said, I'm not taking action unless God shows me. And it sounds spiritual, but it's actually very selfish. It's like the parable of the talent when God gives out five, two, and one. The guy with one's basically like, hey, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to bury it because I'm afraid. What I like is a default for action. Because there's a verse that says, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. There's two ways to view that verse. One way is if I get tight with God, I'm going to get a Lamborghini. Okay. That's not the right view. The right view is if I get tight with God, the desires that I have in my heart are going to be God given. It's like a husband says to a wife, you don't have to guess what the partner wants because you're hanging with them, you're spending time with them, that pretty soon you know what they want. And so I just want to encourage people, if you don't know what God's will for your life is, delight yourself in him and then trust that the desires in your heart are God given and have that default be action. And if God wants to stop you, he will. It's very different. I think the other way is just living a life of victimhood again, where God's got to show me, I don't want to fail. And in scripture, it says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. We must have faith. And faith is taking action when you can't see all the results.
Interesting. So, when it comes to pursuing a dream, lots of us get excited and initially motivated, but then we get discouraged or distracted or we procrastinate. Of course, I'm so guilty of that. So, how do we overcome these obstacles?
One thing is to write down the cost. What's the cost of not achieving my dream? And I have this little exercise, Jeanette, where it's kind of fun, it's kind of silly, but it works. But I call it fictitious follower imaginary impact. All it means is that you write yourself a letter about someone who experienced your dream. So for me, it's books. In other words, for the book Unhackable, before I wrote it, I literally wrote a letter that said, Dear Kary, I've never met you, but I read your book and it changed my life. Let me tell you the story. All of a sudden, when you write out a fake letter like that and put it up on your desk, when you sit there and say, well, gee, I want to watch Netflix, or I want to go do this, or I want to do that, suddenly you look at that letter and say, hey, Julie is not going to be able to have a changed life unless I do it. And so everything, like even you might say, I have a desire to clean the garage. Fine, that's a dream. Write it down though. Like maybe it's the kids will be appreciative, or you'll be able to find things and you'll have a less stressed life. But think about the after. You see what I'm saying? Think about the finished dream before you start, and then you can actually partake in some of that joy. And then it pushes you through that messy middle when we often get hacked.
Now, this couldn't possibly be a solo journey, right? So, how important is it to have someone alongside you, someone who can mentor you and encourage you?
Yes. Listen, every movie that we love, whether it's Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or Hunger Games, whatever, they always have this team. You never find this self-made man, self-made woman. Frodo had Sam. Luke Skywalker had his friends as well. So you just have to realize that it isn't a solo sport, and as you share your vision, other people will want to participate in that.
And on the flip side, of course, how important is it to avoid negative people in your life?
Oh my gosh, negative people, they will keep you down, they will hold you back. There's been a quote by Charles Tremendous Jones that said, you're the average of the five people that you hang around. Yeah, if you're hanging around other victims, other complainers, they are going to bring you down because you're an exception. They don't want you around succeeding because you look bad on them. So there's a story about crabs where they literally trap crabs by putting bait in the bottom. The crabs fall in. One starts climbing out, and the other crabs start pulling it back, and literally will kill the crab if it's trying to escape because they don't want to be wrong. Well, in life, when we try to escape our circumstances and create a new future, other people who will pull you down don't want that. And so, yes, you need to be around people who are going to lift you up and raise you up.
Wow. And Kary, we're almost out of time, but any final thoughts and advice for viewers who have been life hacked and are struggling to get back on track?
Yeah, I'd say take the free assessment. We have an assessment at unhackable.book.com where people can literally look and answer 30 questions, and then out pops this report that says, here's where you're getting hacked. And they can find a lot of clarity and a lot of help over on that website.
Wow, interesting. Well, Kary, it's been a pleasure to speak with you. Kary Oberbrunner is the author of Unhackable: Close the Gap Between Dreaming and Doing, available at karyoberbrunner.com. Thanks so much for sharing with us today, Kary.
Thanks for having me.